The assessment was supposed to take 40 minutes. I had run the Vithari cognitive threat mapping protocol on 411 subjects across 9 species. I knew what 40 minutes looked like. I knew what the data looked like. The instrument returned a spatial model of the subject's threat processing architecture, how their mind organized a room when danger entered it, which zones it prioritized, which it discarded, how quickly the map updated. I filed the model, noted any deviations from species average, submitted the summary to the Continuance Cognitive Sciences Registry, and moved to the next subject. 411 times. It was, as my senior colleague Veth Orath-Von once told me, the most methodical work in the department. Not thrilling, but clean. The human arrived 11 minutes early, which I noted only because the waiting room's atmospheric calibration was set for Varethi physiology, warmer, drier, lower oxygen yield than standard. I had intended to adjust it before he arrived. He sat in it for 11 minutes without comment. When I called him in, he glanced at the environmental panel on the wall, said the air was a little thin, and asked whether there was water. I offered him a hydration cylinder. He thanked me and sat in the assessment chair. His name was Dren Calloway, 36 years old, civilian logistics coordinator, supply chain routing for a Continuance Deep Survey Relay Network. No military record, no combat certification, no threat assessment training of any catalogued kind. The referral had come through a routine continuance wellness screening, a periodic cognitive baseline check, nothing more. The technician who scheduled him had noted, in the referral comments, that his baseline neurological profile had returned what the screening instrument called a non-standard spatial indexing result, probably instrument drift. That was why he was here. I explained the protocol. He would sit still. I would attach the mapping array to his cervical collar points. A threat stimulus, a modeled intrusion event, fully virtual, projected into the room's perceptual field, would be introduced at a random interval between 2 and 8 minutes after calibration. His only instruction was to do nothing. The instrument would read his passive cognitive response. He nodded and asked how long. I said 40 minutes. He said he had a supply routing report due by the 14th hour, and asked if he could think about that while we ran. I said that would not be a problem. Most subjects think about other things. That is, in fact, the control condition, passive, unguarded cognition. I told him this. He said good and looked at the wall. I calibrated the array. His resting neural profile came up clean, standard human architecture. No anomalies, nothing the wellness screening had not already flagged as baseline. I noted the spatial indexing non-standard result in the wellness referral again. The indexing submodule handled how a subject's cognition arranged spatial data, room geometry, object positions, egress points, the location of other bodies in the space. Most species built these maps slowly and sequentially. Humans, according to the 4 prior assessments I had run on human subjects, built them quickly, faster than Vithari, faster than Korathi, approximately equivalent to Sareth military track individuals. Calloway's wellness result had flagged as higher than those 4 prior humans. I suspected the wellness instrument had drifted. I expected to confirm that now. I introduced the threat stimulus at 4 minutes and 17 seconds post-calibration. The stimulus was a standard continuance threat protocol intrusion model, a projected hostile actor entering the room through the primary door, moving at a standardized aggressive approach vector, with a simulated weapon signature registered to the room's perceptual field. Every subject's brain responded to it. That was the point. The mapping array read the response and built the cognitive model. The instrument returned the map in 11 seconds. That was fast. Varethi average was 19 seconds. My 4 prior human subjects had returned maps between 14 and 16 seconds. I noted the 11 seconds and looked at the map. I looked at it for a long time. The map was not of the threat stimulus's approach vector. The map was of the room. All of it, every surface, every object, every shadow mask the overhead panels threw against the walls, the position of my instrument station, the position of the two secondary equipment racks behind the subject's chair, the door the stimulus had entered through, the secondary maintenance access panel on the western wall, a panel that was not marked, that was flush with the surface finish, that had no visible hardware, that I had stopped noticing years ago, and that Dren Calloway had been facing away from for the entire assessment. It was on his map. Its dimensions were accurate to within 4 centimeters. Surrounding each object on the map was a priority index, a numeric weight the instrument assigned based on where the subject's cognition had allocated processing density. The threat stimulus, the projected hostile actor moving through the primary door, had a priority index. It was not the highest value on the map. The highest value was assigned to a position, approximately 1 meter behind and to the left of where I was standing. There was nothing there. It was open floor. But the index weight was, I checked the instrument twice, 94.1 on a scale that topped at 100, where 100 represented the subject's maximum identified threat response allocation. The threat stimulus, the moving hostile actor with the weapon signature, was rated 71.3. I did not immediately understand what I was reading. I ran the instrument's interpretation module. It returned a classification attempt, spatial priority inversion, threat anchor DISPLACD from stimulus origin. It offered 3 possible explanations: instrument malfunction, subject cognitive anomaly, origin undetermined, or a subclass of threat processing it listed as hunter reflex cognition, which it noted was not found in any of the 388 species currently registered in the Continuance Cognitive Sciences catalog, and for which it had no further classification data. I sat with that for a moment. Then I understood what the map was showing me. The subject's cognition had not been organizing a response to the approaching threat actor. It had been organizing the room as a tactical space. The 94.1 priority index on the open floor 1 meter behind me, that was not fear of a threat in that location. That was identification of an optimal position. A place from which the threat actor, the approaching stimulus, could be intercepted with the fewest obstructions, the clearest egress options, and the most coverage of the room's secondary access points, including the access panel on the western wall. His mind had been running a targeting solution. It had been running it before the stimulus finished crossing the threshold. The map's timestamp was precise. The instrument had captured a fully formed spatial priority model 0.3 seconds after the stimulus entered the perceptual field. In 0.3 seconds, while Dren Calloway sat still in the assessment chair thinking about supply chain routing reports, some part of his cognition had mapped the room, weighted every surface and body and object in it, identified an optimal intercept position, and assigned it a priority index of 94.1. I cross-referenced the 388 species catalog. Nothing came close. Sareth military track subjects, individuals who had undergone years of tactical spatial cognition training, produced maps with maximum priority weights in the mid-60s and response latencies above 2 seconds. The instrument's hunter reflex classification was not a continuance-recognized category. It had been generated by the instrument's own extrapolation engine, which I had not known could generate novel classifications. I had never seen it do so before. I looked at Dren Calloway. He was looking at the wall. His expression was the same as when he had walked in, mild, settled, a man thinking about paperwork. I asked him if he had any tactical or threat response training, any at all. Prior military, security work, combat certification, weapons licensing. He said no. He said he'd done the standard continuance safety briefings for survey relay postings. He said there was a self-defense module in the orientation package, but he hadn't finished it. It kept conflicting with his shift rotations. I asked him if he was aware of anything he had been doing during the assessment, cognitively, if he had been thinking about the room. He thought about it. He said he'd been going over the routing logic for a resupply chain on Palin 7. He said at some point he'd noticed the door opened, and he'd thought about where he'd go if something came through it, but it wasn't a big thought, more like something he'd glanced at and put down, like checking whether a window was latched. Automatic. He said, I do it everywhere. I just didn't think it was anything. I sat with that for a long time as well. I submitted the assessment to the Continuance Cognitive Sciences Registry with a recommendation for a new classification, subconscious tactical spatial modeling, grade unassigned. I noted that the subject had no training, no military history, and no awareness of the process. I noted that the instrument's 388 species catalog contained no analog. I noted that the subject had described the behavior as automatic, as something he did everywhere. My senior colleague Veth Orath Vaughn, when I showed her the map that evening, looked at the priority index on the empty floor behind me, then looked at me, then back at the map. She asked if the human had been in the room with me for long. 43 minutes, I told her, the full assessment. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she asked whether I wanted her to review the file before I submitted it, or whether I preferred she not know what was in it. I told her I had already submitted it. She nodded. She put the map down. She did not look at it again.